Hot News, your favorite podcast about fake news. I'm Beth.
And I'm Kelly.
Hey, Kelly, how are you doing today?
I'm busy, but I am pretty good. How about you, Beth?
Well, I am recovering because I have gotten into so many Facebook fights lately that I think I have been, I'm like in the Facebook hospital.
Yeah. Are you ready for a Facebook vacation? I've seen a lot of people lately having to take Facebook vacations.
It's not that I need a vacation from Facebook. I just need a vacation from people who aren't reasonable.
Oh, Beth, they're all on Facebook, though.
No, they're on Twitter, too. Believe
Oh,
me.
that's true. But most of those, we talked about that the last time. They're all Russians.
Right.
They're all being paid to be unreasonable.
So we're in Oregon, and
Yeah.
recently we've had a couple of very controversial things go on. And one of them is House Bill 3063. Do you know what that is, Kelly?
Is it to give all Oregonians a big bag of gold?
Yes. You got it.
Awesome. I'm definitely going to be in support of that one.
All right, everybody, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe if you like this podcast.
We're all done. Thanks, guys.
Done. No, this is the bill to remove the ability of the parent to decline required immunizations against restrictable diseases on behalf of the child for a reason other than the child's indicated medical diagnosis. So what that means is that it is saying, unless your child has a medical reason that they can't get a vaccine, you have to get them. You can no longer say, I just don't like vaccines, or religious
scary.
Yeah. So this is in process. It hasn't passed yet. As of May 2nd, is the latest update on here. Let me just refresh really quick and make sure. Oh, it's in the Senate. Sorry, there was a update. So as of May 10th, it's been referred to the president's desk in the Senate.
Okay.
So it has basically gone through the House, and now it's to the Senate. It passed the House. Okay. So this has been very controversial, and there have been lots of protests by parents who feel that their rights are violated by making them inject poison into their children's veins. That's their take on it. Okay. So, just up front, I believe in vaccines.
Oh, me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
And I do believe that they are a critical part of our society. Okay, so just up front. And I don't think that this is a partisan issue.
It's not. I see this on the left and the right.
Yeah. So this is something where even if you normally agree with our politics, you might not agree with us personally about vaccines.
And that's okay.
That's okay. But let's look at what some of the things that we've heard, and we want to focus on where this information is coming from and also where to get good information about vaccines. So I went and looked up this website, and it's called Stop Mandatory Vaccination. Would you like to hear a little bit about this website, Kelly?
Sure. What does it say?
It says vaccines don't save lives. Healthy immune systems do.
Oh. That's great. That makes a lot of assumptions that you live through the things that you're being vaccinated for, which is, I guess, if you live through it and you don't have lifelong debilitating diseases or, something that happens to your body that makes your life uncomfortable for the rest of it, yeah, sure.
Right.
You have more antigens in your body that you don't necessarily need because you could have gotten a vaccine.
So this guy, his name is Larry Cook. He's the founder and director of StopMandatoryVaccination.com. And I watched his little introductory video, And basically, he feels that like you're fighting for personal rights, that vaccines are a risk. You have a risk of vaccine injury. And he said that nature intended the immune system to be better than the vaccines.
Can we have a little conversation really quick about nature? Because nature currently is trying to kill me through all of the pollen that's in the freaking air right now.
True.
If I didn't take my Claritin every day, I wouldn't be able to podcast or really even leave my home. So I just want to say nature does a lot of things that are kind of shitty. It doesn't mean we need to be horrible to nature, but nature tries to kill us all the time. How about we don't just talk about nature as though it's just one big Mother Nature wrapping us in a great big hug? Because sometimes she's just trying to fucking strangle us.
I have to say, too, one of the things in looking at this website is, I mean, they're really they really push that, like, basically you can make your body stronger on your own by like healthy living. And it really struck me that this is racist and classist in its,
and ableist.
Yeah, in its sense. I mean, it literally is, you have to be a rich white person in order to afford to do the things and to
right. And you also have to be a rich white non-disabled person,
right,
for sure,
and educated, because you have to read all of these books by these, I guess some of them are doctors that have written all these books, and then you have to go buy all these organic, and it's just like, it's insane because there are so many toxins out there in our world, and you cannot function in this world, in this society today, and have complete health by just eating some kale and like
right,
reading a book. Like, there's a lot of factors out there about what's affecting us and our immune systems and our health. And it's not just about a vaccine shot. It's about a lot of outside influences. So it just really struck me how this kind of theory of living was very just non-inclusive. It's not possible for most of the world to do this. And it's not possible for poor people to do this. And it's definitely not possible for large portions of society that live in food deserts, even, to do these types of things.
No, you're absolutely correct. It's, it's a way of thinking that requires a certain level of lifestyle that not everyone and no one's willing to look past that lens either.
Yeah.
It strikes me, and I mean, I know we can get into this later, but it strikes me a little like multi-level marketing.
Yeah.
Where it's that kind of socialization of, here, let me tell you the truth. And that's not entirely, it's not entirely wrong, because you can look at people who are at the forefront of this, people like Dr. Mercola and Dr. Tenpenny. And, there's a whole bunch more, but I was looking through some of the websites while doing the research, and I did screenshot a couple of them just to be like, of course, right there on their website's navigation bar, every single one of them have shop or store, and they all sell supplements that would be, these keep you healthy, don't take vaccines, take these. And, that's, there's the autism natural miracle or miracle medical cure that is a bleach enema for children who experience autism, that they'd say it can be a cure for anything from AIDS to cancer to autism, but it's largely autistic parents who are using it. And it's just,
that's scary.
It's just mind boggling. And it's, you can go into a deep dive for a long time about it. But I think maybe let's find out. Do you want to talk about what the World Health Organization says about the anti-vaccine movement?
I want to just follow up real quick. So because I watched a second video on here, because you mentioned autism, and I was curious to see if his website mentioned autism. It talks about vaccine injury. So he doesn't mention autism, but he has a video up of stories of harm. And this is parents, and that's where it starts. You start to hear autism, and you hear sensory processing disorder. And one of the quotes from one of the parents was, I trusted my doctor. I'm told I'm misinformed. We have to decide what goes into their body. And they also say in that video, there's overwhelming evidence that they cause harm or death. So I would say those statements are not based in, they may be based in that person's reality,
Right.
but it's not reality for vaccines in general. So,
Right.
and yes, let's talk about the World Health Organization here. Do you want to tell us what the World Health Organization says about vaccine hesitancy?
Yeah. So there is vaccine, like an anti-vax movement, and then there's there's vaccine hesitancy. And this sort of lumps them together, but it should be noted that only like 2 to 3% of the people who are so crazy about this online are completely anti-vaccine. And the real problem is not coming from so much them. It is coming from the hesitancy, the vaccine hesitancy crowd that is a much larger group where they're doing different schedules, or they're like, I'm not going to do that particular one. And that's what's causing a lot of these diseases to make a resurgence. And vaccine hesitancy is a reluctance or refusal to be vaccinated or to have your children vaccinated. And it was identified by the World Health Organization as one of the top 10 global health threats of 2019.
Yeah. And honestly, these literal online fights that I'm having with people is they will say literally, what's the big deal? I had somebody say to me on Facebook, only one person has died since 2012. I don't know why you guys make such a big deal out of this.
But that's not true.
That was my response.
Right. It's just because you only have one person who dies in the United States doesn't mean that that's, and some of these we're finding out now, these people who are unvaccinated here are traveling.
Yes.
I mean, that's what happened here in Oregon is we know that they got on a plane.
And it is a big deal because it's not just about deaths. It's about the fact that there are mothers who literally are trapped in their homes with their newborn children and don't feel safe to leave because, especially where we are in Oregon, we are in an area that is under vaccinated because of this movement. And it's not as bad in Salem, I'll say that. But in Portland, it's bad. I mean, it is.
Yeah, where I am, it's terrible.
You don't have herd immunity there, period.
No.
And it's so people are trapped in their homes, afraid to leave, scared that their children are going to get sick because they don't have, they're either not old enough or they can't actually have the vaccine. Or, I don't know. Did you ever have the measles, Kelly?
I didn't. I was vaccinated.
I had the measles.
Did you? How was it? Was it just fun?
Big deal.
Like the brain punch showed?
It was no big deal. Yeah. No, I was vaccinated, but I did get the measles in high school, and I was quarantined by the health department in my house for 2 weeks. Yeah. It's not a little thing. It's not like a cold where you keep going to work. I mean, it is literally a threat to society. That's why it's a big deal. And that sickness, so many things can happen from measles. That's part of the problem with it, is that the side effects are severe. Now, I was lucky enough that I didn't have those major side effects. I just was sick for 2 weeks. They don't know what kind of measles I had because they're not all identified. They just knew it was some form of measles. And now I have an antibody in my system that's unidentified. And because of that, I actually can't be an organ donor or donate blood for the rest of my life. So, sometimes these things do have effects that you can't even see.
Right. And you mentioned mothers with babies. I would also point out that there are people walking around in our community who are at risk that they can't always stay inside. Like a chemotherapy patient can't stay inside. Pregnant mothers are very much at risk. Measles can do permanent, lasting harm. They can even cause major deformities inside the womb if a pregnant mother were to get measles. And I mean, you have to go outside. You have to go to doctor's appointments. You have to live your life.
Right.
And it's unbelievable that, we're living in a day and age where crystal therapy and, Karen read a blog post and decided that big pharma is evil and she's never going to put another shot in her child. And, we can't do that because we're literally putting our most vulnerable populations, the elderly, the infants, the pregnant mothers, the people who are, for one reason or another, immune compromised. We're putting them all at risk.
And I will say too, it's not that I don't believe in alternative therapies and alternative medicine. And, I use essential oils. I use spiritual healings. I do all of that in conjunction with Western medicine. I have my approach is very integrated. But there's some times when Western medicine is the best and you need that. And there are some times when you can circumvent having to go that route. But as far as vaccines, I'm not going to take that risk of, I can fix it if it happens. And that's another thing that I'm hearing is, big deal. We live in a civilization where we have doctors that can handle this stuff. Well, you already mentioned the traveling. I mean, there are people dying worldwide from these outbreaks. And, I bet you if there was a vaccine for Ebola, I think people would get that. That scare, the last couple of years when Ebola came around, people were pretty freaked the fuck out,
Right. And here's the thing. I bet there are people here who would get it, even though we only had one case of it in the United States. Was it one or two? It was no more than two.
I think the one was fake news. The one in Texas.
It's possible. It's possible. But okay, so do you want to talk about that bill? Because one of the things I wanted to talk about was whether or not it should be mandatory. And I don't know that we're going to agree on this topic, and that's okay too.
Right. So that bill, I mean, it's basically, it is what it is. Like, here's the point. Here's the problem is we've now gotten to a point in our area where we don't have herd immunity in certain areas because of the low vaccination rates. And so they had to look at it and say, okay, society is not functioning by itself without a rule or regulation in this area. And so now as lawmakers, we have to step in and do it for you. And one of the examples that I gave was car seats. Back when the 50s, you could throw your baby in the front seat and go. Like, there was no car seat laws, right?
Right.
And then they started seeing that, hey, when automobiles crash, kids die. And it might be helpful if there's a way to restrain them in the cars. Right. And also, hey, it's pretty annoying when I'm driving and my baby crawls under my foot. I would like a way to restrain them. So they started inventing car seats. They started pretty early for just restraining kids so that they couldn't jump out of the car or so that they couldn't crawl around. But then they started realizing, hey, we need this for safety as well. And it wasn't really until the 70s that the government started regulating car seats. At first, they weren't regulated. And now they are. And now you don't think twice about following car seat recommendations. And if you get pulled over and your kid's not properly stacked into a car seat, you can get a ticket for that. And most people accept that. They don't say that's my personal choice to not put my kid into a car seat and strap them in. They just, they pay their fine. And in fact, recently there was a mother who was indicted for murder because her baby died in a car accident and the car seat that she was in was wedged between the two front seats. And because she wasn't properly secured, they charged her with murder.
Right. Which was just, it was a crazy, that was a crazy story to begin with.
Right. Yeah. But my point is that we don't think twice about the fact that we're told to put our babies into car seats, and not only into car seats, but how to face them, how to strap them, what age, height, weight, all that kind of stuff. And we totally accept that we would get a ticket if we didn't do it right. And we don't be expected to be indicted for murder. But
right. And you know what? I will tell you something as a daughter of a first responder. Kids in car seats, especially if they're not strapped in right, still get injured.
Yeah.
And can be killed by a car seat not being strapped in correctly. Right. They can die that way.
So it's a big deal.
So, yeah. So, I mean, that's not like there aren't deaths involved there either.
Right. But there's a lot less deaths now of kids in cars than there was back in the throw them in the back seat if you want days.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
So that was kind of my point, is that sometimes the government steps in when society needs a little bit of help making sure that they're doing things in the safest way possible. And
can you tell me, does the bill say that they have to be, or does it say in order to attend public schools? Because I feel like this was a schools bill. They've mostly been schools bill, but I'm just wondering if this one is a statewide. Do you happen to know?
It doesn't have the breakdown on here of it just says removes the ability of the parent to decline. But I do think it does have to do with schools.
I feel like it does too, because I remember reading something about this, and part of the solution was just, you can homeschool your child. If that is your choice, not that that makes it any better, because there are tons of classes all around the state, and as particularly in Portland, that will allow you to, they're like classes that you can sign up for if you do homeschool. They're like exercise classes through the park or through whatever. And of course, if you're doing that there, you're more likely to be interacting with people who might also not be
so here's the summary. So it says allows child who is not immunized or exempt for reason of indicated medical diagnosis to attend school that provides education program through online courses. It prohibits the child from attending in-person specified school-related events, meetings, and opportunities.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought it was going to be more based on school type of, because that's the only punishment I can think of that they're going to be able to mete out. That's not, I mean, you can't just be like, you have to vaccinate your child, because how would you enforce that is kind of, my thinking is.
It's that you can't enroll for school.
Yeah. You couldn't, like, a cop couldn't pull you over and be like, your child isn't vaccinated, I can tell. That sort of thing. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, and that's okay. This is one where I'm like, yes, I think that bill is fair. Where I come down on, because I do come down on no, vaccines shouldn't be mandatory. And I come down there not because I don't believe in them, or even that I believe in the people who don't believe in them. I come down on that side because when I was doing this research, and when I was reading a book years ago was when I first found out about this, as soon as you make vaccines compulsory, that's when you get the biggest backlash. And we already know there's a big backlash now. And if it got worse, I would be really fearful of the next outbreak that happens, because we know that forcing people to do things, especially when the government is mandating it, is problematic, especially right now when we're in this very polarized political climate. Say if Trump were to say everyone has to get vaccinated, there's not a chance you're going to get a huge number. Even people who believe in science aren't necessarily going to be on board with, oh, Trump said we all have to get mandatory vaccinations, so we're going to do it.
Right.
So what I do think is that if there were a deadly outbreak of something, like say the Ebola virus hit the United States, I think it would be okay to have one vaccine that has to be compulsory. I also think, it's okay to be skeptical.
Right.
As long as you are skeptical in a good way. We know that medical history is filled with experiments that were done in secret. Yeah. You have the Tuskegee experiment. You have plenty of things that were done to people even closer in our history to where we are now. But we did institute the Institutional Review Board, or IRBs, and all all funded scientific experiments have to go through IRBs in order to be approved. There have been mistakes, and there's no medical treatment that's 100% effective. There's no vaccine that's 100% effective, which is why we talk about herd immunity.
Right.
Most of the diseases that we prevent against as a population need at least 80% of the people to be vaccinated in order to stop it from spreading. But something like the measles, like we just talked about, like we just had an outbreak of here last year,
Right.
that needs 90 to 95% of people in order to stop it from spreading.
Yes.
And then, herd immunity is not the only thing that ever works, because you have diseases like tetanus, which we also had a child here in Oregon who had tetanus, and his parents were anti-vaxxers, and he almost died.
Yes.
They gave him one tetanus shot when he was in the hospital, and then his parents refused the additional tetanus shot before he left the hospital, even though he almost died. I want to say he was in the hospital for 6 months.
Yeah, it was a really long time. And I mean, to be honest, I had no clue that tetanus was that severe. I mean, everybody, yeah, you get your tetanus shot, no big deal, right?
Right.
Like, oh yeah, you got a cut or you got bit by a dog or whatever, like tetanus shot. I had no idea what tetanus was until that happened. And it was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to keep up on those tetanus shots. Because it was
for real.
It was like $800,000 of medical bills. And yeah, he was in the hospital for like 6 months to fight off that infection over something that's a very basic shot that you should have.
Right. I mean, the DTaP or the Tdap, depending on what age you are, that prevents against diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis. And pertussis is so freaking scary. I don't know if you've ever seen a video of a child. I remember a couple of years ago, I've had the anti-vaccine debate many times.
Right.
So I remember several years ago watching a video that a parent had posted who was pro-vaccine. And she was posting a video of her child who had pertussis and was in the hospital. And the sound of them coughing, I will never forget that sound. It is unbelievable just listening to an infant less than 6 months old coughing like that, where you're not sure they're going to make it through the end of the cough. That's unbelievable. I mean, even if they live, what a shitty thing to have to live through ever.
Right.
I mean, imagine being worried that you're going to lose your child every time they cough.
Right. So I do want to talk about a couple of things really quick. One is, if you go to the CDC, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, they have a lot of information about vaccines and immunizations. And one of the things that they have is a really great list of like possible side effects from vaccines, as well as there is an organization called Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, where you actually can report if you had a vaccine injury. And basically, they don't confirm at this site whether or not it was a vaccine injury. They just track them. And so it helps track whether or not there is like an uptick. So basically, and they kind of explain it on here as like, hey, here's what we do. We track this information, and then that way we can we can see if something's happening, because there have been things that have happened. Like, I think it was back in the 50s, there was accidentally a live polio outbreak because of a vaccine had it. So that's why they have this. It's like this tracking system to see like, hey, are we seeing an uptick? Are we seeing from this certain vaccine? They can alert the manufacturer something's happened, pull that vaccine, that kind of thing. So this is a great thing. So this is the adverse event reporting system that people can use. And then I also wanted to bring up, there is a national vaccine injury compensation program. Now, I want to bring this up because this is also something that you will hear why people don't like vaccines, is that they can't sue. You can't sue the manufacturer if you have a vaccine injury. Now, there's a reason why you can't, and this makes sense when you understand it. So back in the 80s, so many manufacturers started getting sued that they didn't want to make vaccines anymore. And there started to be shortages. Yeah, it says, so it was this was created in the 1980s after lawsuits against vaccine companies and healthcare providers threatened to cause a vaccine shortages and reduce U.S. vaccination rates, which could have caused a resurgence of vaccine preventable diseases. So basically, the government stepped in and said, hey, y'all, you can't sue these people anymore, but here's what we're going to do instead. We're going to set up this fund, and if something happens, like in very rare cases where you have a severe allergic reaction or a very serious problem, the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program may provide financial compensation to individuals who have filed a petition and are found to have been injured by a VISP, VICP covered vaccine. Okay. So this is the answer to, but you can't sue them. You can't,
Right.
because it was causing a much larger problem. And there's still a way for you to get reimbursed financially if it's found to be, yes, this is what happened to you. Okay.
Sure. And I would just like to bring up that there was a study that came out recently in the journal Vaccine, and it wasn't even so recently, it was back in 2012, that said that only 3% of the things that are claimed on the VAERS website, which is what that's how most people refer to it, VAERS, only 3% of them are actually determined to be related to vaccines.
Right.
Because you'll find things on there that are crazy. Things like, I stubbed my toe, I got into a car accident. The shaken baby syndrome. They have claimed that vaccines cause shaken baby. I mean, that is just...
so
it's crazy.
So there's another article I want to point you to really quick. And this is by the Allergist. So this is the American College of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology. And they have an article out that says patients with vaccine allergy may be safely vaccinated following new guidelines. And it went through and talked about this. And I was like, oh, look at that. They actually are studying vaccine allergies through the ACAI, which is the American College of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology. And they, they're not looking at this from like an anti-vax way or autism or anything like that. They're literally looking at the allergy part of it. So,
right, which is the reason most people have the medical exemption, is because they're allergic to something in it.
So they said that the most common allergy is basically to gelatin or egg protein, and rarely yeast or latex, which is contained in the vial stoppers or the syringe plungers. Those are the most common things. It's not that you're allergic to the vaccine itself. It's that you might have a small allergy to that's why when you go in to get the flu shot, they always ask, are you allergic to eggs? Are you allergic to eggs? Because for egg allergic patients, they need to be careful of that. But they're saying now they're even looking at, there's some things that they can do to go ahead and give the vaccine to people even when they have that allergy to eggs. So anyway, I just thought that was interesting when I read about that as well.
Yeah, it's great that they're looking at that, because we know that that's a population that becomes compromised when people who have, for personal reasons, not gotten vaccinated do become contagious with a disease, and they're walking around with it, and suddenly we have an outbreak because people who can't be vaccinated. But I'm glad they're looking into how to get to that point. So I wanted to talk about, one of the things that I hear a lot is that, but these diseases aren't even dangerous.
Oh, right.
Which goes back to that natural immunity is best and all of that nonsense.
Well, and I think it's partly too just just like how I didn't know how dangerous tetanus was, because nobody dies of tetanus around here, and we don't see these diseases anymore because they've been eradicated through vaccines. We don't see how serious they are.
Right. And like tetanus is something, it'll never be eradicated. It exists in the soil. So if you don't get the shot, you are always potentially at risk. I mean, it can be in any soil. It doesn't have to be like, oh, you're on a farm.
Right.
I always heard it was from rusty nails until recently, when I was reading a lot more about tetanus and found out it just exists naturally in soil, and you just have to be careful. If you get a cut and it gets dirty, you are potentially at risk.
So let me ask you, I want to ask you about cervical cancer.
Yeah.
Gardasil, right? The HPV vaccine.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about that.
Yeah. So I remember the day it was announced that this came out, because you could get it up until the age of 26. And I think I had just turned 28. And I was like, well, damn, that's too bad, because I already have HPV. And it's something I've been dealing with since I was 18 years old, when I was first diagnosed. And the American Cancer Society, because HPV can be prevented through the Gardasil shot, what it does is HPV causes cancerous cells to grow, malignant cancer cells to grow in your cervix. And the American Cancer Society estimates that this year, cervical cancer, there will be 13,000 new cases of invasive cervical cancer, and that 4,200 women will die.
So I want to read you this. This is from the CDC website, and this is the possible side effects for the Gardasil vaccine. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Tell me.
Reactions in the arm where the shot was given: soreness and redness, a mild fever, and 1 in 3 people might get a headache. Now, I guess that's here's the thing.
Too bad.
I've heard a lot of controversy about people not wanting to give their children this vaccine. Right. And I read, and I was somewhere in my research, it might be on that Wikipedia for vaccine hesitancy. The reason people don't want this vaccination is because they believe it'll lead to young girls being promiscuous.
You know that boys can get the vaccine too, right? Boys technically should get the vaccine. I know that Michael Douglas came out and said that the reason that did he have throat cancer, mouth cancer? But he got it from the HPV, bacteria, the germs that spread. You can get them, men can get them too. They can get them in their mouths, they can get them on their genitals, they can get them in their anus. I mean, anywhere that it spreads, it can cause cancerous cells. It doesn't only happen to be in your cervix. That's where we know that HPV spreads and causes cancer. A majority of cancer, cervical cancer. So yeah, here's the thing. It's not a condom. It's just a vaccine.
Right.
And, it
was, I was just like, really? Like, it's again back to like, you're so worried about girls having sex that you don't want to give them a vaccine that will help them not get cervical cancer.
Right.
That you're
she'll
so
really appreciate that when she's older.
That if they get this vaccine, that then they're going to feel free to go have sex.
And I will tell you something. I don't have cervical cancer, but I also have to go to the doctor every 6 months because something always turns up when I go in for an exam. Mm. And so there's always that worry in the back of my head. And I've been dealing with that since I was 18. That's 22 years I've been dealing with that. I'll tell you something, that's not fun for your mental health, especially when you are young and you can't afford health insurance. And you're like, something is wrong and I don't know what it is. And I don't know how I would pay for it. I mean, even still today, I don't know what I would do.
Right.
I have a child and I have a husband. And even though I can go to the doctor every 6 months, I don't always because I get busy.
Right.
And, it's one of those things that you're like, that's not okay that parents can just make a decision for something that might affect their children years and years down the road. And so many people have HPV.
Yes.
Like, seriously, for real. It's worse than herpes. Everyone fucking has it. Just go with the idea that everyone has HPV because I feel like everybody really does have it. But, that's not the only thing, because you had said recently that you got into an argument with someone online and they said only one person has died since 2012 of the measles.
Yes. Somebody said that
But
to
the
me.
world, yeah. So the World Health Organization said that in the year 2017, which, if my math is correct, is definitely since 2012.
Wait, let me hold on, let me fact check that.
All right.
Yes,
check
it's
it for
true.
me.
It's true.
But they have said that 110,000 people died from the measles in 2017 alone.
Right.
And most of those were children under the age of 5.
So, no big deal.
No big deal,
We
guys.
shouldn't be worried about this because we live in America and we have advanced medical here. So we're fine. Even if we get the measles, it's fine.
Yeah. So I wonder what would happen to, say, the homeless population if they were unvaccinated and the measles came back and had a very big outbreak. What
Right.
would that look like? Because that's not a population that's easily tracked. Not that it should be. I'm not saying it that way. I'm just saying that that is a transient population that tends to move around. And that means that, they could be very sick, not getting medical treatment.
Yes.
That could lead to a lot of deaths. And that's something no one's really putting that lens on.
Right.
And it's scary.
It is a good point because you do have to take all of the statistics out there you have the caveat of known cases. Because
Right.
there are unknown cases that aren't reported, unknown deaths that aren't reported. And I did look up, it did seem like in the US, there may have only been one death in 2012 was the first time somebody died of the measles in a very long
And then
time.
2015 as well.
And then, so even that's not even true. So since 2012, there has been another death. So
yeah,
but it's mind-boggling to me to hear somebody say that, like, well, only one person has died in the US, so why the fuck do we care?
Right.
That doesn't take into account, and I've already said this, but like all the people that get sick, the illnesses that they go to, the people who are scared out of their freaking minds that their children are going to be sick, that can't leave their house, that are worried every day, that it leads to so many other things. How many parents have had to miss work because their kid either has the measles or they're scared to go to work and leave their kids with somebody else? The effects on the economy.
Right. The effects on the economy, or, they're only talking about deaths. So you're really disregarding that some people are scarred for life.
Yes.
Some people have illnesses from that will last for the rest of their lives. I've heard of people who've had measles on the inside of their eyelids. I've heard of people who've had measles on their lungs. The measles doesn't discriminate either. It's going to hit you no matter what color, what class, no matter what, it can hit you. And if you're a person who can, you talked about this before, if you're a person who can afford medical treatment, great. It probably isn't going to be as awful for you. But if your neighbor hasn't been able to get their baby vaccinated,
right,
or if your other neighbor is an elderly old lady and they both get sick with the measles, that's still on you.
Right.
And if either one of them die, because it is more serious than they want to believe it is,
right,
that death is on their head.
Now, really quick, because we are talking about vaccines, we have to touch on the discredited Andrew Wakefield. So this is one of the things that was said to me as well, is, oh, you would be just horrified if you read, it would scare the shit out of you if you read all of the side effects of a vaccine. And I said, what scares the shit out of me is that somebody made up a lie 20 years ago and now we're all sicker because of it.
Right.
which is that 1998 study by Andrew Wakefield. We do not call him doctor because he has been disbarred from being a doctor.
That's right.
It has come to light since that paper was published that he basically made up things. He published complete lies, leaking vaccines with autism. And it has made us all sicker. It has led to this anti-vax movement. What really pisses me off is how much time and resources have been spent to discredit it. And the time and resources could have been spent actually helping to find cures and reasons for autism.
Right.
But instead, we're chasing our tails around over Mr. Fuckity fuck who makes shit up. That's what scares the shit out of me.
And, you know, he was also found to have not disclosed that the people who were funding his research were solicitors seeking evidence to use against vaccine manufacturers. That means that they were lawyers, because this is written in England and they're called solicitors over there, or barristers, but solicitors looking to create lawsuits, class action lawsuits against vaccine manufacturers, because they knew that could be really lucrative. And that's who funded his study of, I think it was less than 15 children.
Yes.
And he was a gastroenterologist looking at gut bacteria and saying that he found autism in their gut bacteria, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever, because as a parent of a child with autism, I can tell you right now, there's no blood test for it, because it's a psychological profile. That's how they find out that your child or your adult or whoever it is, that's how they diagnose it. It's not, you can't do a brain scan. I mean, you can, but it's not as accurate as these big long questionnaires that you have to do and the 6-month long visits you have to do. Yeah, and I agree with you. It's all the money that we have spent on research proving him wrong could have been spent doing so many more better things.
Yes.
Finding out what causes it.
Keeping, they already do a lot to keep vaccines safe, but spending that money on making better vaccines that are safer, on more vaccines for more things that keep us safer, those things would have been more beneficial. And to me, just the takeaway of all that time spent not actually helping autism. Because we are still on the forefront of trying to figure out what the hell it even is, and like how to help it and how to treat it and how to identify it and how to separate it from other things. And it's, I know, as a parent of a child that has autism, and I don't have an autistic child, so I don't have your experience, but I can see the parents that I know who do have kids that have autism, the struggles that they go through. And I know just the struggles I go through with kids that don't have autism. And I have a lot of sympathy and empathy for what people go through to try to raise a child with autism. And to have 20 years wasted I just am angry about that. I'm very angry about that.
Yeah. Oh, and probably billions of dollars in study funding.
Kids getting fucking bleach eminas because their parents believe that their autism was caused by a vaccine.
It's so unbelievable. I know that when that first started and I first started finding out about it and people posting pictures and they're like, look, it's worms. And I'm like, no, that's your child's colon lining. You are seriously fucking up your child for the rest of their entire life. And you're doing it because this person told you that it was going to cure your child. And I'm sure that that's what you want. But at the end of the day, that is not going to cure them. And you are just making everything so much worse.
Yes.
So before we even move off of this one, I just wanted to say another big one that people, and I will find people who are pro-vax who will say this. And I understand the hesitancy because the past couple of years in judging which flu vaccine to put out, I don't they have, even the people who make those decisions have come out and said, we have not chosen the right ones.
Right.
We want to do better, because there's so many, and they have to make a choice of which ones they think will be the biggest virulent strains. Right. But what I think people need to remember is that, first, it is a dead vaccine. There is no live strain. The flu does not give you the flu. That is a myth. You might feel a little run down as your immune system builds up the tolerance to what's going on in your body, but you do not have the flu. The flu will put you in the hospital almost always. The stomach flu is not the same thing as the flu either.
Right.
Let's remember that 112 years ago, the Spanish flu killed between 25 and 50 million people.
Yeah.
That is million. That is an unbelievable number that we have never had to deal with in our lifetime.
Right.
However, in our lifetime, people made fun of the H1N1 virus. It did not hit the United States as much as it could have, which we were really, really lucky about. But the CDC estimates 2009, that pandemic of H1N1, the swine flu, killed 284,000 people worldwide.
Right.
51% of those people were in Asia and Africa.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we need to make sure that we're taking care, because it's not just our population, we're an entire world, and we can't just other people, because if something happens here, it's really easy for other people to do the same thing to us.
I would just say, if you see something on Facebook or Twitter or wherever, and somebody says something and they sound scientific-y, and you want to know what they're talking about, go look it up. Do your research. Yeah. Because I will say, one thing that somebody said to me was, well, they don't do double-blind placebo on their testing for vaccines, and that's why I have a problem with them. And that sounded that sounded very scientific, right? So I went and looked it up, and I said to her, well, where's your source on that? And she said, what, that they don't do it? And I said, no, that they need to. And I went and did a very quick Google search and found very quickly the World Health Organization has addressed this and has said the reason why they don't do double-blind placebos on most testing is because they're not testing a new vaccine against the disease. They're testing it against the already in use vaccine. And so it's basically correct. A new vaccine that's been upgraded, and they're just testing it against the old one to see which one's better. So that's why.
That's right, because it's.
And the double-blind placebo is basically like salt water or something that they give the person. So it would be giving a person a non-vaccine at all. And we already
Which
know.
Is unethical.
Yeah, that's unethical.
Do that.
And we already know that the old vaccine is better than nothing. The question is the new vaccine better than the old one? And so when you have somebody saying these things to you that sound like, oh, that sounds very scientific. I'm going to go ask my doctor that, whatever, go ask your doctor. That's fine too. But don't just take their word for it because they sound scientific-y.
Right. And here's what I will point out. There are new vaccines that are double-blind.
Right. They're new. Tested. And they're being tested against
nothing. Because they're brand new.
Right.
That's right. So the rotavirus vaccine that came out, that's tested. That's tested against nothing at all. But it is unethical. It is actually against the law to test against a placebo. You have to test against the next best medical treatment that's out there. So it might be, depending on what it is, it could be a surgery versus a medicine, and which one is going to do better. But I mean, think about it in terms of, you have to think about it in terms of something else. So if you think about it in terms of, say, it's a cancer treatment, you don't say, okay, we're going to test this chemotherapy against nothing at all, against a sugar pill, and we'll just let this person's cancer grow and they can die. Right. You don't do that, because you can clearly see that is an unethical thing to do. You have to test it against, okay, what is the chemotherapy we currently use for this cancer? You use that, and then you use the new, and you see which one is better. And there's definitely a reason for that. And I like that you brought that up.
Well, thank you. That was one of my Facebook fights of the recent history here. So
well, it brings up it brings up a good conversation of like, how do we find the truth? And I came up with a little list of how we find the truth based on just things that I was
Oh,
finding.
okay.
And you might have more to add to this, but like one thing obviously that we know from this website or that we know from this podcast is don't trust everything you read online.
Right. Verify your
Don't
sources.
do that.
And honestly, like we've looked at some, I went straight to the CDC to get answers. And I know that there's going to be people out there, well, I don't trust the government. Well, I'm sorry that the foremost authority on this isn't good enough for you. I'm going to go with the CDC on this one.
Yeah. And, also if a website that you're going to find these alternative news sources has medical alternatives, that's a conflict of interest right there, right off the bat. So if they're telling you not to get vaccines, but they're selling things that are vaccine alternatives to keep you healthy, that's called a conflict of interest. And that means that they have a financial reason to be lying to you. And they are definitely doing that, which I think makes sense. It's like we were talking about when it came to natural news or when we were talking about Alex Jones. Sometimes the reason that people say things that are really kind of out there and outlandish is to get your attention and get you in and make you buy things from them because you believe in them. I want them to succeed. Dr. Merkel needs some more money.
And I will say, it's not that everybody out there with a product is lying to you and trying to just get your money. It's not that. It's just, you have to look at the balance of, maybe what's their motivation. Are they saying something that's complete? Like if you took that to your doctor, would your doctor be like, no? Or is it something that could be a supplement? Like, if you take this, it is, it's going to be good for you. It's not going to make you immune to measles, but sure, that's a healthy thing. You could take that, but not skipping the vaccine because you're taking this supplement, right? So, anyway.
And then you also want to listen to doctors and scientists because, while Dr. Merkela might be a doctor and Dr. Tenpenny might be a doctor, you want to make sure you're looking at the larger consensus of science, not just the couple of outliers. I mean, we have doctors in Oregon who are like, yeah, we don't vaccinate, but they are a very, very small percentage. And if there were things that were really, truly going that bad with vaccines, we would know it. We would see a lot more evidence of it, and we'd have a lot more doctors questioning the use of them.
Okay, what's next?
I think this one is really important. Be aware of your own bias. Don't read stories and don't look for stories that just confirm what you already think. Be willing to challenge yourself a little bit. Now, that might mean that you're pro-vax and you read anti-vax stuff and you were like, that is batshit bonkers cuckoo. What are you talking about? The heavy metals in a vaccine did not cause your child to get into a hit and run accident because the metallic was magnetic and pulled that car toward your child. That's not true. And that's a real thing that someone said.
There is something to be said for understanding what they're talking about. And it's almost like how Will Sumner does that Right Richter newsletter about what the right wing is saying. Like, it's kind of, it helps you understand their arguments and their points. Like, I didn't know that double-blind placebos were such a big deal, like, until somebody brought it up to me. And then I looked into it and was like, oh, well, here's your very simple explanation that took me all of 15 seconds to find. I mean, okay. Anyway.
Yeah. And then, you know what? Tell your own story, because we know that a large part of what I have seen from the anti-vaccination movement is that they like to talk about how they know someone somewhere, some cousins, brothers, uncles, father's daughter once was injured by a vaccine. Or, you also have the other ones that are like, my child died of a vaccine injury. And then sometimes they're lying. It's not unrealistic to just post pictures of yourself getting your child vaccinated and talking about how, I'm glad that I vaccinated my child. It sort of pushes back on the other side of saying, my child did have their vaccines and there wasn't anything that happened because it dilutes the story of the loudest voices in the room are the ones who have had problems, because we know those problems are, we know that some people do have vaccine injuries. I don't say vaccine damaged because I think that that's really bad, horrible wording to talk about a person as
I think
damaged.
vaccine injury is the correct term.
It is, but there's like a whole vaccine damaged group that was started. And then the last thing I would say is just be careful with website names. There's a lot of, you know how the Patriot Act isn't really very patriotic? Right. And the Clean Water Act wasn't really very much about clean water. Apparently, they learned a lot from Republicans because, like, their anti-vaccine websites are things like National Vaccine Information Center and Informed Consent Action Network. Right. And things, you know, some of them are obviously still like the Dr. Mercola site, the Tenpenny site, the Del Bigtree and whatever he does lately. And, you know, there are ones that you can definitely go to that don't have those sort of names where they feel like they're a little trickery, you know, where we talked about the fake news websites that use a real website, but then change the link a little bit, or they have a name that sounds like it could be a real news site. That's what this feels like to me.
Like saveyourchildren.com. And then you go there.
Yeah. Something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, those are some helpful advice, and I think some good ideas. So it is a very touchy subject for sure.
Yeah.
And we welcome all of your comments into our Gmail box after this. Comment away. But before you do, we are going to leave you with our jams. Yeah. And so whose turn is it? I don't remember either.
I think it might be your turn to go first.
Okay. All right.
I think it is.
So my jam of the week is Cinnamon Girl by Neil Young. This is kind of an older song, but it's really good. And I had to choose it this week because like I said previously, I do subscribe to using, like, I use essential oils. I do some natural things in addition. And one thing I do is I take a lot of cinnamon. And what I have found is that it's a very good replacement for me for ibuprofen. And I use it on my, for menstrual cycles. Like it's like my doll. I will take cinnamon.
Oh, that's nice.
And I found that it really helps me, like, it's basically helps with inflammation. And so I am not supposed to take a lot of ibuprofen. And so for me, that was my kind of like something I could do that was natural, that isn't going to mess up my colon for when I'm old.
Right.
And so it kind of made me laugh. I wanted to throw a little bit of natural into this discussion. Please vaccinate your children, and then give them some cinnamon to help with the redness and swelling at the site. That's my recommendation.
Do the cinnamon challenge when you get home, dude.
Yeah. And then you can listen to Cinnamon Girl by Neil Young, which is a very good song. Sure.
It is a good song.
All right, what you got for us?
My jam of the week is a book called The Gene, An Intimate History, and it's by Siddhartha Mukherjee. And this book was one of the first big scientific books that I read, where I really discovered how much I enjoy reading about science. It's very accessible. It's a super big book, but it's more fun than you would think it is to read. It's like a history of discovery of the gene and what that looked like, and how they go all the way back to, I want to say it starts in Egypt. And it's just it's a really interesting, and he talks about his life and how mental illness in his family and how it's traveled into different members of his family. It's just a really interesting book about the human genome, and I really recommend it. I think it's accessible and fun, and it gives a really good insight into a lot of science that some people don't think about.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, I know that we're going to probably get some comments. So if you want to comment on this episode,
bring them on.
We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter at Podcast Fake News. We have our Gmail at podcastfakenews@gmail.com. And we have our website where Kelly's going to post all these links and everything with the blog. And you can even comment on that at podcastfakenews.com.
Yeah, you can comment on that.
Yeah, so comment away. And hey, if you like this episode, feel free to share it with your friends who may need to hear some of the things that we said. And be sure to rate, review, and subscribe so other people can help find us. And we will be back in 2 weeks with another episode, as long as we aren't wiped out by a curable disease by then.
I mean, fingers crossed. It's only 2 weeks, but hopefully we'll be okay.
Yeah, or if we don't get killed by the pollen, because man, allergies, you're not kidding.
That is more likely to get me today.
God, if they had a vaccine for allergies, I would be all over that.
Yeah, 100%. Yes. Sign me up.
All right, girl. Okay, well, until next time, don't forget, spread jam.
Not lies.